Good evening. My name is Paul Mugen. I am the Director of the Community Development Department. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight regarding housing in Greenfield, City of Greenfield. The news in Greenfield regarding housing is absolutely terrific. Other places in a region, not so much. Welcome. If news reports are to be believed, housing has become more controversial than ever, with reporting on the issue typically one-sided and sometimes off the skids regarding analysis of the true housing issues which beset our communities. California's history demonstrates that our state has experienced challenges with housing, with hosting a sufficient housing supply at affordable prices for generations. The challenge today is not a new crisis, but instead is a phenomena born of years of conscious neglect of what Greenfield shall leave to others to decide, except to say that need, the state's go-to creed, likely is a mistaken doctrine in which to judge housing construction in California. When the legislature declared, quote, California has a housing supply and affordability crisis of historic proportions, they were correct. The admonishment set the stage for the laws we see today coming from Sacramento. A partial listing of some of those laws are shown on slide 2. The California Environmental Quality Act, which protects the environment, California Building Code, the Housing Element Law, the Housing Accountability Act, the Housing Supply and Affordability Act, and many are very familiar with SB 9, which permits a much easier regulatory scheme for building accessory dwelling units in your own homes. Moving forward, these laws do several things, beginning with limiting government like ours to regulate housing. With that, however, it is noteworthy to review what the California League of Cities, the California League of Cities says about housing in general and government's role in housing construction. Here, excerpted from the League of California Cities, quote, local governments are just one piece of the complex scenario that comprises the housing development process. Cities don't build homes. The private sector does. California's local governments must zone enough land in their general plans to meet the state's projected housing needs. However, cities don't control local market realities or the availability of state and federal funding needed to support the development of affordable housing. This is true not just in California, but nationwide. And this is one reason why the millions of dollars that the state of California has availed jurisdictions for low income and very low income and moderate income housing is a welcome policy across the state to address the housing emergency that we're currently experiencing. As we will see, the city of Greenfield has exceeded by leaps and bounds the degree of housing construction which the state says the city needs. Need is a poor metric because, of course, we always need more housing. That is a given. RHNA, a common term which we will discuss later in this presentation. The important thing to discuss is what kind of environment are we in government creating for others in the private sector to build new housing? Here in Greenfield, Mayor Lance Walker, Councilman Bob White, and Drew Tipton, who formerly chaired the Planning Commission, along with others on the city's city council, and city manager Paul Wood, have set an exemplary example in creating a strong environment to serve the needs of Greenfield's residents. Considering building housing is no easy task. For those who may have built a home or merely added on or perhaps constructed a new ADU, these issues on slide 3 should ring a bell. On the right are represented some of the major activities in building a house. Of course, we start with land and is it available? Are there environmental constraints, the governmental paradigm the land exists within, and then the site work and grading, the foundation work, framing, plumbing, water, gas, electricity, infrastructure, insulation, roofing, framing, fire protection. It's a big job and it's not easy. What's more challenging are the impact fees. On the bottom of slide 3 are the impact fees that apply here in the city of Greenfield. And the city of Greenfield fees are among the least expensive, the lowest impact fees in Monterey County. And those amount to approximately $25,000 per unit. So before one pounds a nail to build a new home, there's already $25,000 out of pocket for such things as sewer impact fees, water impact fees, traffic impact fees, police impact fees, school impact fees, regional traffic impact fees, park impact fees, community center fees, general facilities fee, fire impact fees. It's not insignificant. These high costs make housing construction a risky endeavor for a developer. And it's just one reason that we have done so well here in Greenfield is so difficult elsewhere. Our fees are lower than many other places, yet that our fees in total still amount to $25,000 per house. In general, recently enacted laws are intended to limit local authority over housing regulation, because too often jurisdictions are not building enough low-income and very low-income housing to serve low-income households. Ultimately, housing inducements are intended to result in more people living near the locations where they work, thereby eliminating the need for long vehicle trips, which in turn ostensibly helps address the impacts of changing weather patterns known as climate change. Let me get to slide 5. Okay. Here, slide 5 is a good representation of the problem these laws are intended to address. Here is a common thoroughfare here in Monterey County, Highway 68 north and southbound, which appears to show people crowding the roads in one direction on their way to work, while the other direction is free flowing. This is representative of the jobs housing balance. This is the phenomenon where people are working far away from their places of employment and must drive to work. It's that simple. Take, for example, let's see, this is, okay. Take, for example, also the jurisdictions in Monterey County who have produced 0 income housing units, 75% of the way through current 8-year RHNA cycles. They are cities of Carmel, Gonzales, Monterey, Sand City, and Soledad, or similarly, a list of those jurisdictions who have produced 0 very low income housing units, 75% way through the current 8-year RHNA cycle. Carmel, Delray Oaks, Gonzales, King City, Sand City, and Soledad. Now, I mentioned this not to pick on our sister jurisdictions in Monterey County. What this amplifies is the difficulty in building housing. It's that simple. It's not easy. And that's why the city of Greenfield has a lot to be proud of with regard to its housing stock. One may notice that these groups of very low and low income housing producers, some cities appear to have constructed no units of either low or very low income units, none. In contrast, the city of Greenfield during the same period has constructed 98% of all very low and low income housing units in the 1,500 plus square mile area south of the city of Salinas to the southern Monterey County border, while others are beginning to step up to the plate and assist with the housing emergency. The city of Greenfield holds a long tradition of meeting its responsibilities and welcoming all types of housing in our community, while others share a less than stellar record. In that vein, Greenfield's elected and appointed leadership have served its residents in ways and means that only can be called outstanding. In fact, to the best of our knowledge, no other jurisdiction in the entire Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments has a better record producing all types of housing than Greenfield's record. Greenfield has met its RHNA numbers in all income categories, very low, low income, moderate, and above income categories. The best we can do at this time is evaluate our measure with the state of California through the RHNA process. RHNA is an acronym which stands for the Regional Housing Needs Allocation Process. Before describing the city of Greenfield's performance as it relates to RHNA housing mandates, I should like to quote from Government Code 65583, which states, quote, sites shall be identified as needed to facilitate and encourage the development of a variety of types of housing for all income levels, including multifamily rental housing, factory-built housing, mobile homes, housing for agricultural employees, supportive housing, single-room occupancy units, emergency shelters, and transitional housing. Greenfield has all of these types of housing except transitional housing. What this means is that through the city's housing element, which has begun, our community's housing goals, objectives, and policies present themselves through the housing element process, during which time the community will be invited to participate and help city staff determine what areas within our community we will be zoning and designating land use for housing, all types of these housing. This slide, I've also included our production results in numbers. Our RHNA allocation for cycle 5 in each income group is noted for a total of 363 units. We are over 100% in each category, something no other jurisdiction in Monterey County has achieved, with 337% over our allocation for low income households. 82, we built 82, and our allotment was set at 57. Because Greenfield enjoys a long history of creating and fostering a suitable environment for housing construction, it bears noting a severe and recent lapse in this environment. Between the years 2014 and 2018, unfortunately, the city completely failed to submit its HCD annual housing performance reports. Therefore, for approximately 5 years, Greenfield's housing production not only went unreported, the consequences of this underreporting also cast a cloud over housing construction in our community. Beginning in 2019, under the leadership of Mayor Lance Walker and City Manager Paul Wood and the City Council, the city removed the variables responsible for these lapses and restore the city to its traditional stature, serving the needs of the community. When members, excuse me, from time to time, members of the community, our community, may approach the dais during public comment periods and they'll say, well, the city's done an okay job in housing, or, we need more housing, period. And I should like to emphasize that the city of Greenfield, as I've already mentioned, is doing the best job in all of Monterey County, bar none, than any other jurisdiction. So for that, thank you, elected and appointed officials for meeting the needs and exceeding the needs of our residents and members of the community. Now, Greenfield's housing sector itself touches 4 of the primary strategic principles which guide city operations, and are principles that City Manager Wood has directed his senior staff to focus all their activities, because they all do center around major strategic goals and values. In housing, they are: 1, to ensure a safe environment for all Greenfield community members; 2, promote a diversified, sustainable economy; 3, ensure a healthy, enriching environment for all Greenfield residents; and 4, develop first-in-class government structure and strategy. Before delving into each as it relates to housing in our community, let's, for those who don't get as excited about housing as I do, let's consider for a moment, what is housing anyway? Because housing is not the backside of an underpass. For Mayor Walker and the City Council, we view housing as something more than just a roof over our head or a place to rest and recharge for the toils of tomorrow. Housing is home. Its roots dating back to a famous and much quoted decision from an English judge, Sir Francis Coke, he made in the year 1604, that resonates to this day. At the time, the judge was considering a case about the limits with which a sheriff in England or Great Britain had to adhere to before he could enter someone's home to deliver a writ. At the time, the Judge Coke declared that, quote, "The house of every one is to him as his castle and fortress, as well for defense against injury and violence as for his repose." Through the years, this is translated into the cliche, a house is one's castle, and protections of which today find refuge in the Constitution itself. The seriousness in which we in Greenfield take the housing crisis in the state of California becomes obvious when we consider the degree in which our policies and implementation procedures touch the 4 strategic values already referenced and which were held accountable by City Manager Wood. As noted, the League of California Cities make a very important point regarding housing, and that is that we governments, we don't build housing. Private sector builds housing. Nonprofit corporations build housing. We in government, we don't pound the nails and actually build the housing, but we have a tremendous impact on the environment that we create to get this housing on the ground, so families can move and live. They are homes. At the same time, governments may create contrived obstacles for housing construction One obstacle that's a big problem would be not turning in your annual performance reports to the state of California. They don't like that, especially when you do it for 5 years. As I mentioned, the leadership in this city, the last, I don't know, 4 years under Mayor Walker, that's been corrected. I personally have been responsible for updating and correcting those lapses. So the state is well aware of our production and the achievements that we've made in our arena production. This is really important too, because more and more cities are coming under the scrutiny of the enforcement arm of the state. This week, the city, well, let me say, it's gratifying to know that others may look to the city of Greenfield as an example about how it's done, because we have done an exemplary job. You may know that in response to the crisis, the Housing and Community Development Department of the state created a new housing accountability unit. It's called HAB. I don't know how they pronounce it. Wow, I'm not sure. I hope I don't learn very much about them, honestly. However, this week they announced that along with the Attorney General's office, HCD is studying housing construction in the city of San Francisco. Their intent is to identify and remove barriers to the housing and construction of new housing. This action was triggered by San Francisco possessing the longest time period for approval of entitlements for housing than any city in the state of California. So they're going to look into it. They're going to find out why. Before discussing the exemplary record Greenfield has, I should like to permit just a few words regarding the state government's role in the housing sector, as we often hear that the role through its popular acronym RHNA. You've heard it already many times during my presentation, and it's pronounced RHNA, the acronym RHNA, from again the term Regional Housing Needs Assessment. The way it works is every 8 years, the state of California makes a determination as to what every jurisdiction needs to meet the housing demand in their communities. That determination is based on certain criteria, numerous criteria, I might add, but among them, including the jobs to housing balance, which I showed earlier, sewer and water infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, and other variables. From this data, the state directs what each community should plan to produce in planning documents, such as their housing element, in order to meet the needs of the community. We are approaching the last calendar year of cycle 5 of the current RHNA cycle, and currently are preparing to receive cycle 6 numbers from the Housing and Community Development Department through the Council on Governments AMDAC. This will cover the years 2024 through 2032. The state assigns to each community RHNA number in various income categories: very low, low income, moderate income, and above moderate income, which is the number of housing units the state expects communities to need and to prepare to accommodate their construction. As noted, governments do not build housing, but nonprofits and private enterprise actually build housing. So, what do these RHNA numbers actually mean? Slide 6 before you documents our current RHNA performance, but in terms of what the RHNA number means, they refer to the general plan and the housing element, which requires a jurisdiction to zone properly to accommodate the requisite RENA numbers. Where are we going to zone for low-income housing? Where are we going to zone for farm worker housing? Where are we going to zone for very low-income housing, and so forth and so on, senior, possibly transitional housing? The state of California said that Greenfield fulfills its need to build very low-income units if we can be responsible for 87 units in cycle 5, for this current cycle. The city has actually built 164 units, nearly double the city's need in low-income units. The state of California assigned a RENA number of 57 low-income units for cycle 5. In reality, the city has built 197 low-income units, 345% attainment. For moderate income units, the state assigned Greenfield a number of 66 units, but to date, the city has built 77 units, and our above moderate state mandate is 153, and we have built 158. One word about these numbers, because it's a reality. What triggers to be counted for these numbers is when our building official, who's here with us tonight, when the building permits are issued. Once a building permit is issued, we can account for those numbers. And so they're very fluid. And the other interesting issue is that the annual performance reports are done on a quarterly basis. I'm sorry, every April. Each April, we submit those reports. So, for instance, the housing production that is occurring today won't be recorded with the state of California until the next annual performance report is recorded. And then the other phenomena is that the state will tell you this if you have experience working with HCD often. They do a great job in trying to make sure that the numbers available to the public online are accurate, but they aren't always accurate. And that's just a function of their own staffing and workload. So they're most of the time accurate. So if for some reason you think there's 160 units and I say there's 158, the difference might be one of those three reasons. So as you can see from the slide before you, the city of Greenfield has exceeded its RENA requirements in cycle 5 in each of the 4 income groups. And by the way, we still have another year remaining in this cycle. So we have another year left to go before cycle 6 even begins. As noted by AMBAG during their last meeting, this is an exemplary record, unmatched by any other jurisdiction in AMBAG, which is a 2-county jurisdictional boundary. So again, let us discuss briefly how the city applies the 4 strategic values in housing, beginning with number 1, ensuring a safe environment for all Greenfield community members. I put a brief overlay together. I just moved the slide over because when it comes down to designating the land uses, we're carving it up. Where is commercial? Where is residential? Where's industrial? This is just a small visual to indicate the work ahead, because the preparation of the housing element is expected to be very community and intense. Is going to be an exercise with intense community involvement. We'll be seeking many more workshops to talk and discuss and really codify the dreams and the aspirations of the community into a policy document, which is our general plan. And that effort has already begun. So ensuring a safe environment for all Greenfield community members, the city's housing element is not a document intended to just tack on the requisite housing units that the state asks us to and call it a day. That's not our approach. Through the leadership of Mayor Walker and the City Council and City Manager Wood, the city aspires to not create just housing units, but rather neighborhoods with a sense of community where residents have pride of ownership and consider their housing units not housing units, but rather home where they can raise families. One of the things that we don't see very much in our community is public commendation aimed at the city's building official and inspection team. A lot of times we hear, oh, the fire department, they're our heroes. It's nice to see our building official, Gabe Martinez, here today because Mr. Martinez is responsible to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of our housing stock. In short, the California Building Code is designed to protect everybody's safety. In other places, Florida, South Carolina, other areas who have their own challenges sometimes fall short in that area. And so Mr. Martinez and his staff work tirelessly to inspect new construction and respond to those who build and maybe out of developers from out of town and who are fully engaged in producing these housing units. So rarely, if ever, do we hear from residents, well, the building official is really doing a great job. But with these RHNA numbers, I'd like to say publicly, Mr. Martinez, you're doing a great job. I point this out because, in fact, the city's building official has one of the most consequential responsibilities in our community. That is ensuring that these hundreds of units that are built and are constructed, the new housing that I'm referring to, conforms with the California Building Code and adheres to best practices which ensure a safe environment for all Greenfield residents. Like I said, not everybody gets as excited about housing as I do. So permit me a moment to say that the earliest building code ever discovered is approximately 4,000 years old, 4,000 to 5,000 years old. It was discovered and it exists, was written during the Babylonian Empire, written by King Hammurabi. Our current code is not as tough as it was back then, but it's fun to read what it said. Here's an excerpt just to break up this presentation a little bit. It's a little bit politically incorrect, but again, it was written 4,000 years ago. And this is the building code, the first building code that Western civilization has acknowledged. Quote, if a builder built a house for a man and completed it, that man shall pay him 2 shekels of silver per se, which is approximately 12 feet of house as his wage. If a builder has built a house for a man and his work is not strong, and if the house he built falls in and kills the householder, that builder shall be slain. If the child of the householder should be killed, the child of that builder shall be slain. If goods have been destroyed, and because the house was not made strong and it has fallen in, he shall restore the fallen house out of his own material. If a builder has built a house for a man and his work is not done properly, and a wall shifts, then that builder shall make that wall good with his own silver. We don't have it quite like that today. Although the city has come a long way since the first building codes, serious issues in the form of nuisance properties beset our community from time to time. Let's see slide 7. Just as a visual. Earlier this year, the city rescued, and again, this ties into our first value, which is ensuring ultimately that our homes and housing stock is safe for its residents. Earlier this year, the city rescued 33 people in a deplorable condition of squalor from a house that was 1,500 square feet in size. 33 people were living in the structure. The conditions included minor children as young as 15 days old. Upon further research, it was learned that this property had 45 other properties throughout Monterey County. Whether or not his other properties were in the same condition is unknown, but these conditions are against the law. The Community Development Department works hard to address nuisance property issues. Should you have a concern regarding overcrowding or what you may suspect could be an unhealthy or in a situation violent of our health, safety, and welfare standards, please contact our department and we'll do everything we can to investigate it and correct any situation that requires correction. Your building official works every day to ensure that our community lives in safe housing, which conforms to the California Business Code and enhances the character of the community rather than detracts from it. Today, this house has been demolished. Landlords who may be abusing their privilege of housing in manner inconsistent with the law should think about addressing the situation and restore the health and safety and welfare standards to their operation. This is consistent with our first basic value of ensuring a safe environment for all Greenfield community members. The community should expect and we intend to deliver when it comes to addressing nuisance properties, especially when they present themselves. Mitigating such properties can be a labor-intensive exercise, but one worth the effort because it impacts the neighborhoods in which we live, raise our families, and advance the notion of strong community care in our neighborhoods. The second strategic value, which Greenfield's housing sector represents, includes promotion of a diversified, sustainable economy. It was not very long ago when the city was hard pressed to attract any capital investment in the community, let alone nominal investment. Economic development is a subject for a different segment. However, the housing sector remains a vital contributor toward producing a diversified and sustainable economy. For too many years, Greenfield has been described with the following descriptors: low income, disadvantaged, poor, transient, outlier, unsafe, challenged. Mayor Walker and the city council and city manager would aspire to have and have successfully replaced these descriptors with accurate terms which reflect our community: vibrant, dynamic, safe. If we were to say rich, I'm not referring to money and income. Rather, I'm using Oxford's definition of rich, meaning high quality, high values, endowed, impressive, strong, highly productive. That's the Greenfield that I know. These are the words which we affix to our Greenfield community and what we refer to when we say that we have met our RHNA standards. We have built the housing that the state of California has asked us to build, unlike many other jurisdictions. Greenfield, the city of Greenfield has the strongest record for housing construction in our greater community region. As noted in the government code, there are many different types of housing: multifamily, rental, factory built. I already described them. We have built and call home to every single one of the various types identified in the government code, except one. That would be transition housing. It's the only one. Yet all others. This exemplary record is key toward attracting the type of economic development who employs our children, who allows our college graduates to return to the home in which they grew up and have meaningful careers that we've seen in our community, because housing is one of the important variables which employers examine when they consider investing their capital. The third strategic value, and there's only four, I'm sure, probably getting tired of listening to me, but the third strategic value we in the city strive to achieve is to ensure a healthy, enriching environment for all residents. In normal circumstances, communities such as ours would seek out new commercial investment and new housing. Here in the city, however, the city is witnessing unprecedented phenomena. It's never happened before what we're experiencing today. Not only is our housing metrics unprecedented, we also are host to approximately $1 billion of economic development in one stage or another in the development process. Under normal circumstances, these factors would be exceedingly desirable. That's what many throughout the state really want. They seek and they want what we have in our city. However, the old adage, be careful what you hope for, because you might just get it, is a pertinent thing to consider. Some in our community may ask, well, is this a good thing? This unprecedented level of development and housing construction? And this is as director of community development, this weighs on me every day when I come to work. And that is my belief that answer to that question deserves a significant qualifier. And that would be probably yes. And regardless, we don't build this stuff anyway. Others are looking at our community to see if they want to invest. But let's assume the answer is probably yes. We want more housing. We want more people here to create jobs. But here's the qualifier. And it's my qualifier. It's something that I live in. I don't know. I guess I'm almost dying. Sometimes I feel like it. I live and die by every day. And that is that the conditions in which we're immersed right now today is one that's done right. All of this new stuff needs to advance seamlessly into the community, because when we're all gone, somebody's going to need to live with the decisions that we're making today. So it's something that we in the community development department every day. Is the Marriott Hotel going to fit in our Walnut Avenue specific plan? And we're working on that, because the hotel is the only new hotel between the city of Salinas and the Monterey County border to the south. That's for a different conversation. This does get to the third strategic value that pertains to housing, which is our dedication and commitment to ensuring that a healthy and enriching environment for all Greenfield residents. And that means that when we're producing this level of development, we're working hard to make sure that it fits with the environment, that our wastewater treatment plant can accommodate the new housing. New housing doesn't work if you can't flush the toilets, or as we've seen in Flint, Michigan. And I chuckle because some people might say, well, that would never happen. Oh, yes, it does. Just ask the people and the children in Flint, Michigan. 40,000 of their houses were destroyed because elected officials and professional staff had a little dispute over water, and it contaminated their entire housing stock, killed a few people, about a half a dozen, and those responsible today are making their way through the Michigan court systems.
So it's a serious issue. And we're working tirelessly day in and day out to make sure that the intensity of development ongoing in our community works. It's that simple. We're using the California Environmental Quality Act and every other tool that we have to make sure that developers are paying for the things that they're supposed to pay for, and we're not casting a blind eye to things that need to be fixed, or we're saying no when we need to say no. I say a few words about the California Environmental Quality Act because the California, because CEQA, that's its acronym, CEQA provides a strong segue to discuss our fourth example of strategic value that applies to housing that city manager Wood holds all of us department heads to account. And that is that the housing sector, both, well, all of our RHNA housing is either low income, very low income, moderate, or above moderate. So it covers all housing, whether it's market rate Nino homes off of Elm or our farm worker housing off of Walnut, doesn't matter. But that all of our housing sector provides first in class structure and strategy throughout the construction process. We often hear the words health and safety and welfare in a number of various situations. These words can be used to stop development or advance development, and certainly plays a major role in the construction of housing. We know through media reports of disasters occurring in other states or odd situations, such as building houses in a flood zone, or sometimes is seen in South Carolina, or substandard construction work when structures collapse, as has been seen in the state of Florida. Here in Greenfield, Mayor Walker, Councilman Tipton, who served on the Planning Commission, and members of the City Council, Councilmember Walker, City Manager Wood, that provide the leadership necessary to the staff tasked with implementing these goals and objectives embodied in the general plan that serves as a foundational policy document. After we're finished with the housing element in 2024, we jump right into the general plan, which will set the course and codify our city's dreams and ambitions and aspirations for the next 20 to 30 years. At the present time, AMBAG, the local council on governments, is engaged in the process of allocating its RHNA numbers for development of the cycle's 6th cycle, which is an 8-year cycle. That process is shortly concluding, and our housing element, which is being prepared coincident with that, with the last year of cycle 5's RHNA process, will be prepared at the same time. I will close. That summarizes my presentation and how our housing sector really is tied into the strategic values that we've been talking about for years. And I'll close by saying a small piece of good news that I'm privileged to announce. Today, I spent a lot of the afternoon along with community development staff accepting the submittal for the EAH housing project, which will provide 222 units off of Walnut Avenue. They expect to, well, I won't say their expectations, but submitting their full plans for our planning review is a major accomplishment. We expect by January at the latest to have all of their 50 pages of conditions and mitigation measures and the things that they must address in order, as I mentioned, to seamlessly become a part of the Greenfield community. So that concludes my presentation. And let me put a slide that I never did get to on the right, and I'm happy to provide this if anybody wants it. The city of Athens, you can see what can happen. You let things get a little bit too urbanized. The poisoning of an American city, Time Magazine, national news, and then some photographs of some of the terrific developments that we've built through the years. Walnut Grove Apartments, I believe, is phase 2 and 3. That concludes my remarks, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions if I can. This is the slide I was looking for. Before we take any questions, I just want to amplify exactly how well we're doing with numbers, because I can talk all you want, but the numbers speak the true story. Because as I mentioned in the second slide, it isn't easy to build this housing. And the city in the red with the yellow arrow shows the percentages of where we are today. Before the close of cycle 5, there's a blue box, and that blue box depicts what will be our bottom line production for cycle 5. 443% of very low income, 429% of low income, and just over 100% in moderate and market rate housing. So again, that concludes my remarks, and thank you for your patience listening to me for however long it's been.
Thank you, Paul. I just have one, maybe request if you got a few minutes. You talked about impact fees, and you said it's up to $25,000 per unit. To me, when I started thinking about impact fees, it was a little nebulous. I didn't quite understand what they entail. What are they for? Why do developers have to pay them? Maybe a little bit of explanation.
Well, thank you, City Manager Wood. Impact fees, that's a very, very, probably the most important issue that developers ask us and need to know when they're constructing their budget for development. What are your impact fees? And I'd like to start with the school fees, because the school fees we don't have any jurisdiction over school fees. The schools determine the school fees, and in my past discussions with the school district, so don't hold me to the facts on this, but at one point in time, the school district had to deal with or accommodate approximately 700 children in their system who, by definition, are claimed, they're considered homeless because, by definition, they live in a multi-family dwelling with other families. And again, this is why I'm very proud of our record in MENA. But a school impact fee goes toward the school districts to help the schools accommodate the additional demands on students that they may not be equipped to do. Similarly, to pivot back to the city's impact fees, water and sewer, it's a great example. For many, many, many years, past administrations have deferred maintenance on the wastewater sewer treatment plant. And with all infrastructure, that can only happen for so long. At the present time, we must improve our wastewater sewer treatment plant if we want our toilets to flush, if we want our development to, if we want our infrastructure to accommodate the development that's ongoing. So in our case, the city is working tirelessly to pursue a full upgrade of our wastewater treatment plant. But this is something that our wastewater or that our development impact fees go toward. You know, it's money that's put forth to the city. It's intended to address base infrastructure. Similarly, park and rec impact fees. I think that one of the best indicators of a health of a community is what their recreation department looks like. It's probably the best, most important department in a city. Are we giving our youth things to do, so forth and so on? Programs that inspired our children and teach various things. In Greenfield, of course, we have science workshop that was brought to our city over a decade ago. I think Mr. Huerta is in the audience today. It was brought a long time ago. Science workshop has flourished. Our recreational department is a mature recreation department, better than so many that I've seen throughout Monterey County. Fees for this kind of development cost money. Everything costs money, and it goes toward that. Water impact fees goes towards the city to help pay for the infrastructure. And another way of viewing how important these fees are is to really say, well, what if we didn't have them? What if we just didn't have impact fees? Well, take a look and read the situation in Flint, Michigan. In Flint, Michigan, they don't have a California Environmental Quality Act. And in Flint, the city leaders and the elected officials, they flowed dirty water contaminated with lead through every plumbing system in the city, killed about a half a dozen people and made everybody, well, not everybody, and made thousands of people sick. Impact fees for water, for sewer, those are not the type of things that the city does that, you know, nobody's like, let's go to the wastewater sewer treatment plant and just hang out. It doesn't happen yet. Look how vital it is. We can't do everything we want to do or aspire to do in a community without money to do it, without the fees, and the impact fees are a big part of that. I would also add $25,000 a unit. When you think about it, man, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for anybody. In other jurisdictions, those fees are as high as $80,000 per unit. So building housing is not easy, and it's very risky.
Good day. I don't know, sorry, I forgot your name. My name is Laura, and I have a comment. I am gonna have to contradict you there with having a safe and healthy community. I don't agree with that because right now here in Greenfield, we are overpopulated. There's homes that have, Drew Tipton, this Tuesday city council meeting, he was saying how there's over 20 people living in a home. That's really unsanitized for if they have kids in those homes. You're getting kids going to school with lice. Those homes have several feces or pests, cockroaches. It's very dirty. Some of the homes that you go around the community and see their front yards. The streets, they're filled with cars. Again, I was in an incident not too long ago. You can't see when they're gonna get out of the driveway or whatever. They're parking all over the place. Even if you have your own vehicles on your driveway, you get your neighbors coming and parking in front of you. Some of us are paying permits. However, we're trying to make our house upgrades and make it look better. But then you have this neighbor that is violating so many codes. I think really staff here in Greenfield has to push into enforcing those codes. There is a code stating how many people are allowed per square feet in a home. And this really has to get enforced. You will also hear stories of little girls getting violated by men within that same household. This is really bad, and it's really affecting our community, how the kids go into school and bully others, or the problems that they're having in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you for those very important comments. The question involved what we're going to do, if anything, regarding overcrowding, a general lack of compliance with our code enforcements, vehicles parked on the lawns, and a deterioration of various nuisance properties that have a detrimental impact on neighborhoods and even affecting children. And I want to start and try and keep my answer brief because it's a very serious challenge. And the first thing that the public must understand is how seriously the city manager and his staff take this issue. It's an issue that is discussed on a case-by-case basis every week, almost every day. If you see something, say something. That's the best thing that I can say. Please call me at 601-2452 or the general number at City Hall, 674-5591. And I must also advise, we do prefer that such complaints are not anonymous. We are so dedicated to addressing the problems of nuisance properties that you have brought up, that we want as many facts as can be provided to us, because we will follow up on all of them. And I'd also say that it's very important because there are constitutional issues. We are not able to just go into somebody's castle, somebody's home, and just start making accusations and things. There's significant laws that we have to follow. So as much information as you can give to us. There's another initiative that I'm very excited about, and that is our rental initiative, a rental dwelling initiative. It's a proposed ordinance that exists throughout the United States, including the state of California, and has been of great interest in cities such as Salinas. The rental ordinance would provide a small permit for landlords. It's a permit that landlords will be required to obtain from the city as an inexpensive permit. It's an opportunity for the fire chief and the building official or their designees to ensure that a property is compliant with overcrowding laws and parking regulations. And in many parts of the country, such a regulation is very well received and it works very well. And it goes a long way toward addressing the very issues that were just brought up. So there'll be more information about that. And if I can question myself, I have to do a better job in messaging and communicating with the terrific work that our department does. And I don't do a very good job of that. And so I think the community can expect a better job at that, especially as the housing element, which is going to demand so much input from the community, as will this rental ordinance. So I would say stay tuned, because nuisance properties is a very high priority for the city management.
Sure. Hello, Laura, this is Gabriel Martinez, building official with City of Greenfield. We have met before. So we, as Paul mentioned, we are dealing with each case, each complaint case by case. In some cases, we do find overcrowding, which we have taken care of. And as Paul mentioned in one of during his presentation, one of the homes that we ended up having the property owner, the landlord, relocate his tenants. There was about 33 people living in very poor conditions. There's other reports or other complaints for which we have no documentation, except that someone calls into the city, leaves an address and complains about overcrowding. We do our best to investigate, but if we don't see any evidence from the exterior, we have to, even though we do open a case, we have to close it. Now, something that Paul Megan mentioned is that we would like everybody to, in writing, to file the complaint. Even though he mentioned that we don't want to take it anonymous, your name will remain anonymous. So we do encourage the entire every member in the city of Greenfield to do so. That is the only way that we will be able to proceed and investigate. And if there's any information that additional information that we may need, we can go and reach out to whomever places a complaint and ask for more information. I hope that helps.
Hello, my name is Jose. I don't see in the plan a housing for senior citizens in Greenfield. Today, I hear you're making more houses. Greenfield got a big problem. The parking space I saw in different streets in the night when you come in with the night. No parking to you park your car, no parking for your house, no parking. Second, another problem is in Greenfield. A lot of houses have a lot of rats. Because a lot of people live in houses. You don't have control of anything. Another thing is, what do you do with the water? You don't have no police either. Enough police to check in the security of the houses in Greenfield. No water right now in California. What can I do? No houses, no houses. No parking in Greenfield. No water. We need water. We need security. You don't have no security here. Another thing, the senior citizen, we need houses. Because I saw many senior citizens in Greenfield. You try to find a house, you don't find a house.
Thank you for those comments.
Talking about more of houses, not so much senior citizens. No. Okay. And what would be the difference? What would be the difference in a senior citizen house versus any other type of house? Because we've got houses that are, above moderate pricing, low and very low. So I'm not sure exactly what the question is related to seniors. I mean, there is senior housing, but they're not houses, right? And so what would be a defining feature? Would it be security? I think I heard you say. Okay. Anything else?
I don't have a why the city give you a permit garage in their house.
Little houses.
Yeah, why would you do the garage?
Yeah.
House.
Okay, let's talk about ADUs.
You know the thing is,
Yeah.
the people who live in the I know in Mexico, something like that, the people have a lot of house. You know what I mean? It's hard for the
Yeah.
When is the night? When you come to pick up, when the sidewalk.
Wow. So I think, I would say, yeah, we got parking problems. The 80, talk about ADUs, talk about when all this development goes on, parking is accounted for. What we're not going to account for, because it's not legal, is 20 people living in the house. Right? So the way that's being addressed is hopefully through this, this rental ordinance, whereby we get to right size the number of people in a dwelling, and that also would help with parking.
I don't know, sometimes people live in the house, cars.
Yeah, right, right. Well, so part of this would be everyone, if people have a 2-car garage, and Gabe, jump in, but I'm thinking they've got a 2-car garage. They've got, if they have a 2-car garage, they also have 2 spaces in a driveway. And then potentially, they might have a space, and it's up to whatever ordinance we decide, and that there would be lots of public input into this. Maybe an additional space on the street, but probably not 3 spaces on the street. And so if there is a rental ordinance that includes parking, there might be little stickers that show that, yeah, you've got a space somewhere. But, you know, this is all one big problem of overcrowding in the houses, because you do have 7 cars, you might have 8 cars. And if in fact, 2 of those families or 2 of those cars are living in the garage, well, you're not going to have 2 cars sitting in there either. I mean, when the development happened over by the gazebo, there's alleys back there. And the alleys are supposed to have, they do have parking spaces and garage access in the rear. Well, if people are living in those garages, you're going to have cars out on the street.
I noticed the people on the cars, somebody comes to them, the streets.
Yeah.
I don't have no problem.
Yeah.
The streets.
No, you get a clean shot right down the middle. That's it.
Because we were like I can think of it. One time I went to Diego, parking my car. I don't think the parking says no parking because it's not clear enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how much pay for people that parking?
$100,
So $300.
$300. Yeah, I believe it.
You need that here, you need that here.
Yeah.
Why? You spend money, the guy is in there, for example, money paid for very hard, what happens?
I'm hoping that you'll see, sorry, I'm going to get to one more thing. I'm hoping that you're going to see over the next week or so, if you ever look at the police department's Facebook page, they're starting to ticket some of these cars that are illegally parked and have been parked for over 72 hours. And so we're starting to address it. Part of the issue is it's gone on so long that people just expect it. I got a story from the police department 2 weeks ago about they were ticketing cars that had been left for over 72 hours. People complaining because it's like it's never happened before. Well, we get it. It's the law though. And they did complain. They did call their council person. But the point is we're starting to address this. We know that that's not the only answer, but that it's a holistic issue that includes the housing, the parking, and code enforcement in general. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they do here. I've seen people take tickets. Right. Let me write that down. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the building official again. So I'm just going to partially answer your question in regards to the overcrowding or garages being converted. And that is also one of the questions that we had through Facebook. Yes, there's ordinances that the city had adopted in regards to requirements to convert a garage into an accessory dwelling unit, or also known as an ADU. However, the state of California has through, and I don't have the numbers, the Senate bills at this moment, but the state of California has actually kind of tied the city's municipal codes to where we are not even allowed to require an additional parking space or parking spaces when an ADU is being, or garage is being converted into an ADU, or if a new ADU, new structure is going to be built. So that makes it a little bit hard for the city to require an additional parking space unless they are over half of a mile distance from the closest public transportation. So that is the answer in regards to the why so that we cannot do something about the cars. Now, the ordinance before these Senate bills that were enacted or became law in 2019, the city of Greenfield was previously allowing garages to be converted into ADUs, but at the same time, we were requiring per municipal code additional parking spaces, not just for the main dwelling, but also for the ADU. That is, unfortunately, that is gone. There's really nothing that we can do, whether we want to do something about it or not. And the community development department is aware of that.
This on? So my name is John Huerta. I live at 1228 Avena Avenue, former mayor of the city of Greenfield, and appreciate the opportunity. From perspective from all the regulatory and statutory and laws that we're speaking about today. My parents bought a place or bought a property on 5th Street in 1965. They bought 2 lots. So they can build one, they can build a house on one, a single family home. And that's where my dad began getting involved with different advocacy groups for housing in California. And he was part of a group with Hector de la Rosa Sr. And Art Naldosa, their community activists and community health provider, administrator, creator of the South County Rural Health Project in King City that the Mee Memorial Hospital was very supportive of at the time. But anyways, so the housing, my dad was part of a housing effort to build the very first 2 low-income houses, single family homes in Greenfield, one on 5th Street and one on 6th Street. So I say that because that's a lot of our history to begin with, besides the labor movement with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and besides myself getting involved with local politics as an elected official here in Greenfield for 18 years and 14 of those as mayor. I just wanted to start with that, just to kind of like chill out a little bit myself. Haven't been up here in a bit, but I had one response, if I can. I know in 2015, 2016, the city was proposing a rental management plan, and Susan Stanton was the city manager. The council didn't support it, but I think the example or all the literature, all the information is there still somewhere. But you pointed out, Paul, the city of Salinas has a similar program. They do, but there are others in Southern California you might want to look into that are very successful. Rental management plan is where the city takes a proactive approach to go into the rental homes and find out who the property owners are and to talk to them and have an approved ordinance, have an approved plan by the city council, so we can try to fix and make solutions for a lot of the things that I just heard the last 20 minutes about. You got to say what it is. They're rental homes. And I've sat up there in the dais and I've done the research, and I know that out of the, let's say, 4,000 single-family homes in the city of Greenfield, easily 50% are rental homes. That's a very high percentage. And I'm being nice by saying 50%. It's probably higher. So that's number one. Number two is,
So could we count on you to help us support rolling that out? Because it's my understanding that some communities who want it, there's an outcry. The landlords do not like that idea.
okay, well, yeah, well, no, I appreciate that. I'll respond to that as a former mayor. So the real estate companies here in Greenfield and in the Monterey County Realtors Association, which supported all of my campaigns, they were like, no, that's not going to happen, because we don't want the city, which is a local government, to get involved with the private sector. It's not about getting involved. It's about working together to make some of these solutions that still exist today. It still exists today, whether it's Mayor Dart or myself or going way back to other mayors, they still exist. So I think to answer your question, I can help in my, as much as I can or much as I'm able to. Now I'm back to work full time. So my question, I want clarifying question. When can I make a public comment? I know I'm making public comment now, but public comment about SB 330. I wanted to make a public comment about that. I don't know if you want me to do that now, but my question was on the financial part of the wastewater treatment facility that I know a lot of work has been done the last 20 years to get. I know we were successful with state funding to do some improvements. We know that we need more than just some improvements. We need an overhaul, or we actually need a new wastewater treatment plant facility. So so I think for the benefit of those listening, for benefit for us here, what's the financial plan for the current wastewater treatment facility and water systems plan? Are you going to augment federal and state grants that are there right now for us to apply for? Augment that and supplement that with the impact fees that you mentioned from developers, and then supplement our own cash from the city, possibly through the cannabis business fees and taxes. So maybe I'd like to listen to you and the city manager about a financial plan to let's get this wastewater treatment plant facility financed first before we build it.
Okay, great question. Yes, so the answer to that is we've been working for the past 3 to 6 months with the State Water Board. We've got a team of grant writers based in Sacramento that are working directly with them and what they've got to offer. We believe that a majority of the $50 or so million that's going to be required, a vast majority will be covered by State Water Board grants and other grants that they're getting through the American Recovery Act and ARPA. We've done, or we're almost done with doing rate studies related to, because we haven't had rates increase in a while, and a lot of times a requirement of getting these grant funds is to make sure that we raise rates a little bit. I don't think anybody's surprised. Our rates are fairly low and we haven't raised them in a long time. We certainly would like to raise them as little as possible, but it'll probably be a part of the equation as well. Also, we have $4 million in ARPA funds that the city received. One of the main things that can be used for is infrastructure. We fully expect to be using at least 25%, so at least $1 million from the ARPA funds for wastewater. We also have impact fees from the development that's been going on for quite some time. We've saved up a few $1 million that can only go for wastewater improvements and water improvements. So what you basically said is exactly where we're going. I don't know if the cannabis, if you saw my finance and budget presentation weeks ago, that money's there. Is it segregated outside the general fund? No, because it legally must remain in the general fund, but we're keeping track of it. And we either have or haven't spent it based on the way you want to look at it. But it's like $6 million for the last 4 years that we've received. We're going to be receiving around a little bit less than probably $2 million a year with our existing cannabis base. But there is and you'll hear this part in the economic development talk that Paul's going to give. There is a group that's north of, well, in one of the sites that was designated as a cannabis site that did not get developed, that will be getting developed, that will be doing, I believe it's cultivation and manufacturing, I think. Yeah. So we're going to be getting some more in. So that amount will go up a little bit. So I don't know that we're going to be technically tapping the cannabis monies for those, but I think we've got a really good start because we also have ARPA monies for a bunch of other things. And don't forget, we've got a new, we got an $8.5 million grant that we need to put a lot more money into for the community center. So we need to buy the property, we need to actually do the plans and do all that. But we think that the community center is going to cost around $13 million. And that was before the inflation started happening. So if the state gives us $8.5 million, we still have another 4.5 plus that we need to provide for that recreation center. So cannabis money, I'm certain will go there. Some of our measures V and T or V and W or whatever they are now, we have, as I've talked about before, we have not surpluses, but we have fund balances because it was coming in faster than we were spending it on public safety, code enforcement, and recreation. So recreation was always the least funded out of those monies. And so I'm looking at it as the fund balance that's in Fund 220, which is where all that money is. The bulk of that should probably go towards, and this is council's decision, I'm not making a decision for council, but the bulk of that money should go towards the recreation part because it's been shortchanged for the last 3 or 4 years. So I hope that answers your question. It's definitely on the right track. We'll probably use some general fund monies for the wastewater treatment plant and the water plants. We're buying a new well. We've got an appraisal done on a piece of property. We're in negotiations right now. And we've got grants, at least one grant that we've applied for the purchase of the property as well. And that's on the water side. Thank you.
Good evening. Sorry I was late. I was over across the street at the Little League annual board elections. Anyways, back to the parking and the housing issues. As a member of the Planning Commission, it seems like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place with all this new legislation and the entitlements that developers are allowed with the density bonuses. So along with those density bonuses, the parking just isn't sufficient. And people that live here understand that. So, and it seems like this new legislation coming down doesn't think about our rural communities where we're pretty much isolated. As far as going to work for some of us, I commute an hour to Monterey. My husband's commuting to Sunnyvale every day. And it's just really difficult. I think what they have in mind is for communities that are allowed to work and live in their community. And that just isn't the case here. And just to get back to the parking, I'd like to ask Mayor Huerta, it wasn't like this before. When did you see this change? And, how do you think we should, because I don't fault people for having cars because they're trying to work. They're trying to get to work, but we don't have the luxury of public transportation to get us there. And it seems like it's getting worse. And I know other cities like Monterey, they have parking plans and they have, parking. They used to be meter maids. I don't know what they are anymore, but people get excited, but that's going to be difficult to do here because people aren't buying cars just to, pollute the neighborhoods. They're using them to get to work. So it's hard.
Um, so you have to also take into consideration that the Department of Labor for the Salinas Valley, in response to some of the conditions that we're dealing with in those older neighborhoods, and in some of the new neighborhoods as well that were built in the last, 30 years, whatever. The Department of Labor, the stats are that Greenfield has the most original or bona fide or recorded jobs, meaning that we have more employees out of any other city in the valley that work in all the industries. And so that's one. Two is the median household income has gone up like big time, like 30, 40, whatever percentage you want to put out there. It's because you've got in those homes, and a lot of them are privately owned and some of them are rentals. Those are the two. You've got a lot of breadwinners in those homes because you have a newly married husband and wife living with their mom and dad, or you have different family members living with the family. So you have 4, 5, 6 employed people living under one single family home. That median household income is going to go up. It's not a victory for us. It's more a challenge. And how do you get in there with a number of folks that live under one single family home, and then you look out there on the street and there's 5, 6, 7, 8 cars because there's 4 or 5 leaving to commute. I was a commuter for many years, working for the County of Monterey, working for the Farm Worker Institute, working for Drew Massa. I commuted to work. So all of us are commuters. So there's got to be somewhere in your plans, that your strategic plans that you're speaking to, you've got to have a place in there for parking and for maybe it goes under your plan to do a rental management plan. Maybe you can have a provision in there to provide code enforcement for parking, making sure that the folks that, because I've been hearing it since I left the council. I've been hearing constant public comments about the parking issues in our neighborhoods, and that's a pretty big challenge. But I wanted to get to while I'm up here, and I wanted to right now is the best time, I guess, to introduce the SB 330. The other one I wanted to, and I really appreciate the opportunity for this housing, and I'll be there for the economic development. I think it's the first Thursday of October. I'll definitely be there for the economic development workshop. And so I think the city needs to acknowledge Alfred Diaz-Infante. He was the CEO of Chispa, and I think he did a lot of good work here in the valley, and especially, we're talking about Greenfield. He was a leader that provided a lot of different opportunities for development for affordable housing and farm worker housing in the city of Greenfield and throughout the region. But he had a special place in his heart for Greenfield, and we know that. And so I like to, at some point, maybe the new mayor and new council, or what have you. But I'll be back with some more information on that. I think Alfred deserves that from the officially from the city of Greenfield. So I'd like to introduce the SB 330 for the planning and building departments. In 2017, California lawmakers passed a package, as you know, of housing bills designed to increase housing production in California. These bills provide funding for affordable housing, preserving the existing affordable housing, to streamline the housing review and approval process, and increase accountability and reporting requirements from local governments. In 2019, the SB 330 was enacted to further boost home building in California for 5 years. So that is in effect now from 2020 to 2025. SB 330, also known as the Housing Crisis Act, was designed to speed up the streamlined process by which cities review and approve new housing. This streamlined approval process applies to residential and mixed-use projects, which propose a combination of uses such as retail and residential. Before 2017, cities could undertake.
I'm sorry, what did you just say? I didn't get that number.
The,
Or 17?
yeah, before 2017.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Cities could undertake a standard review process on a proposed housing development, conducting as many meetings as deemed necessary for a thorough review. SB 330 shortens the number of meetings on a housing development project to a maximum of 5 public hearings. And those can include meetings, workshops such as this, and appeals. Under SB 330, the city can only deny a housing development for objective health and safety reasons. Also, the city cannot deny a project based on aesthetics or any other reason related to quality of life. Severe consequences may occur if the city violates the provisions of SB 330, which include being sued or fined. And so if a court determines that the city has inappropriately denied a housing development, the city may have to pay millions of dollars in fines. It may be ordered to approve the project, losing all remaining local control. And I think that's the main part of why I bring this up tonight, is that we don't want to lose that local control. We want to be compliant with new housing bills. I understand that there's a number of bills that affect everyone's work here at the city. But at the same time, I think it's best to comply with the new housing, well, the whole package of bills that were signed into law in 2017, and a lot of them were enacted in 2019. So those are my comments on the SB 330.
I don't have a whole lot to say on all that. I'm familiar with all of that. I've read most of those. So I am familiar with most of those. So one of the things we have to be aware of, as you said, is the objective standard on health and safety. I often am the lead when somebody comes to visit and wants to build a project. And more often than I like to say, and we have a record of it as well, the conversation starts out with, we want no environmental review. We want $2 million of subsidy, and we want no conditions of approval. Haven't gone that far, but no permit fees, no anything. And the state hasn't gone that far, really. And it's exactly the kind of things like the parking and also in real politics, you know, what in reality, the state hasn't truly come to terms with what the sanction would be. And the last thing that I really want is to relinquish local control, or I think anybody in the city. For example, the parking, just take that issue just independently. The most profound intensity of parking situation that I've experienced and witnessed in my professional life has been what occurred in Washington, D.C. around Capitol Hill. And that used to be not unlike the city of Greenfield, believe it or not, when it comes to parking. You could always park down the road, parked on the driveway. You had row house after row house after row house. And there was a time, it's now been probably 20 years, but what they do now today, every single car has, you have to be permitted. Every car within probably 5 miles of the US Capitol has to have a permit. Or they're booted. There's no ticket writing or anything like that in DC. It's booted, and that's a real problem. That's a $400 or $500 problem every time. So, but when the level of intense parking gets just beyond a community's ability to handle it, you know, then it's an enforcement problem. And there's parking garages. We have land to do that. I mean, it would even, you know, it could be paid for, but
I just want to say, I think it's really important. And you talked about parking, you talked about housing, we've talked about all of that. Every time a parking situation comes up now, I'm thinking housing. And you brought it up yourself. You posited that 50%, it's multiple families, and not necessarily even from the same family, but multiple families living in the same place. In my mind, I agree with you 100%. I think that is the crux of the parking problem is the overcrowding. And so we talk about parking, but we're going to have problems unless we can ticket all we want, we can tow all we want. But to your point, these are people that live here in the commute. They need the cars. These are not mostly extra cars. These are cars for all the people in those houses. It's not set up for 7 cars per house. And there are neighborhoods where it's not even set up for any cars. Your neighborhood's not set up for a ton of cars to be parked on the streets. Over by the gazebo, same thing. So in my mind, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think the biggest bang for our buck is to focus on the rentals. Because focusing on the rentals with a parking ordinance along with that, I think it's our 80% for 20% of the effort. It may not be exactly that, but, and then we reach out from there and say, okay, we also need this. We also need, the parking permits, whatever, knowing that that's going to be very difficult. But I think the biggest hurdle, and I think Paul hit it on the head, was we need support, because even in Salinas, last thing I read was the city agreed that they would not necessarily require city entry into a house. I'm speaking now as a city manager, not as an owner of a rental property. I got a problem with that, because we need to know who's there. Number one, our number one strategic priority is public safety, not making sure that there's not too many people in the house, but for safety reasons, make sure that there's enough capacity within that structure to safely house those people. So we agree. It'd be great to work together to get as far as we can on this issue.
Mr. Huerta, you have such vast experience. I would like to share just a brief couple comments about the issues we're talking about. And in preparing for these types of events, you hesitate sometimes about talking about your neighbors or the peninsula communities, Carmel, and so forth and so on. But a couple of things. In south of the city of Salinas, to the southern Monterey County border, for 1,500 square miles, Greenfield is the only community. Well, we've produced, I say 98%, although the numbers I see is 100%, but I know there's activity going on. So I say to myself, it can't be 100%. So I just knock it down and say 98% of all very low and low income housing has been in our community. And that spans what, 4 cities in the unincorporated area? And as we saw at AMBAG a month ago, we have communities like Carmel, Monterey, demonstrably more affluent communities who we know from anecdotal evidence that they're in the city hall, they're in the top echelons. We don't really want that in our community. Put that in Seaside. And I know you, former mayor, you know that happens, and we know it too. And so with HCD, our hope and prayer, I guess, and we can do the lawyer thing, we hope and pray. HCD can look at our record and see that we share their goal. Because if everybody else helps a little bit, like something better than one city producing 100% of low income and very low income housing in one jurisdiction, then we all don't have quite the intensity of the problems you witness. Some have zero.
So the very first thing I thought about was grant funding. You got to understand that the state and the federal, they know everything that goes on in the Salinas Valley and in Central Valley. These guys, I mean, that's their business. And so you've got to correlate what you just got through saying is that we need improvements to our wastewater treatment plant. But at the same time, we're providing more new farm worker, clean farm worker housing, affordable housing that the feds and the state in their circles, yeah, Greenfield is doing their thing. Okay, we need help and assistance to carry that water to get those grants so we can build a new wastewater treatment plant. Put more pressure. The council needs to be more proactive in getting that and ringing the bell, they call it, is to apply for these grants
Well,
and make sure that you put them on the spot, because we are providing the location and the workability, you want to call it, to build the farm worker housing here in Greenfield, ag housing. I mean, my God, we have one. The Walnut Grove is a product of the Department of Ag. Originally, we don't have any other project like that in the valley. I like people to know that. So anyway, so the part that is important is to identify where your success is going to be. And is it at the state, at the federal, or is it just the state? So I think that the city needs to take in consideration to go out and get that funding, because we're doing our due diligence here with low, very low in farm worker housing. Now, the other part to that, and I'll say it as I'm here tonight, because I'm getting a little hungry, but is the other part, and I think the city manager almost alluded to it, honestly, but then he backed off. But I'll say it as a member of the public. I think the construction permits that the city is working with across the board, housing builders, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit or private sector, I think you need to ease it up a little bit. And here's why I say that. Soledad, their plan is to build as many single-family homes as they possibly can so they can get the first big box in the valley. And I'm not going to let that happen, or we shouldn't let that happen. Our community should not let that happen. And a reason why I say that is, I think that's for me, from my perspective, I think that's the wrong strategy, or I should say, it's a strategy that takes a lot of, what do they call that? Uplifting, what do they call that? Yeah, heavy lifting, because we're doing it more from the city of Greenfield is doing the housing and what we do from all the income levels. That's one of the things that, I don't know, even before we start taping city council meetings, I've always had mentioned that Greenfield is the home to new housing for all income levels. I think we want to keep that, but there needs to be a balance. There needs to be market rate and affordable housing projects going at the same time. Right now, you have the Nina Homes, private sector developer, home builder, and then you have the Walnut Grove. You have Mike Avila building private farm worker housing, and then the EAH is coming online. So there's an imbalance. So you need to go and get those housing developers. There's many out there. In my employment now, I'm going to like many counties in California. And I see a lot of housing builders, home builders on the private sector side that would be interested in coming to Greenfield. So I think you need to ease, I'm just telling you straight up, you think you need to
Okay,
ease up on the permits? Because I know that in 2007, 2008, 2009, there wasn't a cost recovery. The city didn't do well getting those funds when the crash of the economy happened nationally. And then the dot-com one, that was under Mayor Romo, but I know the city, we didn't hit those, but remember, those are one-time fees. They're not reoccurring revenues. So just take that in consideration when you speak to that. But those are not reoccurring fees and revenues. Those are one-time fees. That's my little soapbox on that. But I think, again, on the construction permits, not the impact fees. Some cities do negotiate. I don't think that word's been said enough. I've been listening. I keep an eye on the city. Don't think I'm not. I don't think you use that word negotiate with developers. And remember, it's all developers. It's all housing developers, and it's all retail and commercial development. I don't think the city is using that word negotiate enough. But I think that one of the things I wanted to say tonight, besides the SB 330, is that you need to ease up on those permits. I don't know how you do that. I don't know, but I'm just as a public member, I think you might get a response from home builders that would love to come into Greenfield and build like when Mike Nino builds, but maybe even at a larger scale. And so I thought just to mention that.
Thanks. There two issues really require a response for the public's benefit on the grants and the fees. But first of all, it would be the city council's decision. They certainly can lower the fees. So the fee schedule is a city council decision. We'd also say that were the books audited, we would find that there were numerous years in the city where that fee schedule wasn't adhered to, and it caused a lot of problems. But that's been fixed. And then on the grant issue, it's a little bit of inside pool, but as a former elected official, you'll understand this. As you know, I was a redevelopment and housing department director for a period of years, ending in about 2013 and 14. You were still mayor. My successor and the city council, in which you are the leader as well, established the city as an entitlement jurisdiction under CDBG. And that precludes the city from competing with grants. When I was the redevelopment director, we could get any grant we wanted to because we scored for it so well. And we did. I brought $7 million in home and CDBG grant money to this community. When I returned, I learned that there's 2 jurisdictions in the county. We're an entitlement jurisdiction, so everything flows through the county now. Now, that can end in about a year, but we're constrained. We can't even apply for them now, sir. It's really unfortunate, but we're going to keep at it.
I just wanted to say one thing. In my closing comments from Tuesday night's council meeting, I did a little report on the League of California Cities Conference. And one of the most beneficial sessions that I went to was on rural economic development, rural cities, so small towns. And on the board was the city manager for Clear Lake and the city manager from Blythe. And they had some great things to say. And the moderator, of course, they were there because this is what they do. But I am going to give them a call because the things you talked about, the big box, and how I think Clear Lake got out of Walmart, yet they're not the biggest. And so there's a strategy to that, and we're going to explore that. So that hopefully middle of October, I think, whenever the economic development, first Thursday of October, okay, in the weeks between now and then, we will have contacted and hopefully work something out to come up with maybe an outline of a plan that will obviously incorporate downtown, but everything else as well. So that's my plug for economic development, first Thursday in October. Thank you, Mayor.
That's great comments. And that wraps it up. Move to adjourn.